Welcome to O'Sullivan Guitar Works Studios, and as you can see we're still banished to the Shadow Realm, and today we're going to be talking about the Line 6 Pod 2.0. So as we said, the Line 6 Pod 2.0 is an amp modeler, it is an effects processor, it is a DI, it is a lot of things in a small famous kidney bean red shaped pedal, I'd say, if you have the extension, but really it's a processor. And this is going to be an interesting one, hopefully not too long-winded. I'm not going to cover every single feature in the demos. I will talk about it in the specs section, but I'm mostly going to show you a few sounds and a few things you can do with those sounds. Now, a small update on the videos is that after this week we are going to be going 2 weekly, so fortnightly. So I'll release this video on today the 1st of August, Sunday the 1st of August, and you'll get your next video in 2 weeks time. Due to the school holidays and a busy schedule with work and everything going on, I'm going to find it very difficult to get weekly videos back out for a while. Once the holidays have died down, I will get back to my usual weekly schedule, but for now, if you can be a little bit patient with us, we will be back to normal as soon as possible. So let's head over and hear some details on the specs of the Line 6 Pod 2.0. So the Line 6 Pod 2.0 was launched in 1999, and I first purchased mine in 2003. I was talking to a guitarist who had recently bought one, and he showed me a few of the features on the pod at a practice space, and we were speaking about what it does, and I found it really interesting and wanted to check one out for myself. They were really difficult to find because they'd been out for a few years. There wasn't a lot of them around, and at this point Gumtree and things like that weren't really very prevalent, and there were no Facebook Marketplace and there was no reverb.com, so I had to call around to a lot of guitar shops in London to try and find one. I eventually sourced one to a place about an hour away on the tube. At the time, I was a pretty broke student, and I convinced my dad to lend me the money to buy it, and I think I paid the princely sum of £50 for it, and it was boxed. It was as new. It had the manuals and the driver disc, and it had the power supply with it, all original. And something that interested me was the timeline of the Line 6 Pod. It was launched in 1997, and this was the old iconic kidney bean shaped pod. In 1999, there was the upgraded Pod 2.0, which also was the kidney bean, the one we're talking about today. It offered more models, which we'll talk about in the specs section. In 2007, there was the small pocket pod that came out, which, I think mixed reception. Not a personal thing I would want to play with. I tried it out and I wasn't really a fan. And then in 2011, there was the mobile pod iPhone and iPad app. After the Pod 2.0, there were things like the Pod XT, the Pod XT floor versions. There were the 300, the 500, the 500X floor pedal board versions. These all offered a variety of different things, including much more amp models, much more custom, ranges of things you could do with stomp boxes and, signal chains. So let's talk about the specs of the Line 6 Pod 2.0. So first we'll talk about the front of the pod, its features and the things that you can do with it, and all of the inputs and outputs. So obviously the 2.0 features a power switch. Turn it on, bring it to life. It has the input for your 1/4 jack, which is generally a guitar that you're going to be plugging into there. It has a phone's input, which is a 1/4 as well, which is controlled by the output knob on the front. It has a left and a right output. They're both balanced 1/4 inch TRS connectors, and they basically can work with balanced equipment, and they can also take an unbalanced signal as well. If you want to use it mono, you plug just into the left side, but you can use it stereo left and right. A very important feature of the pod is the AIR mode switch on the top between your outputs. Now that switches between the amp mode and the direct mode. Now the amp mode is if you would like to use the pod to drive your EQ and drive for the front of an amplifier. And the direct mode is if you are plugging into a desk, mixer, recorder or PA. Next we have the input for the foot pedal connector, which is either the FBV Express or the FBV shortboard. The MIDI in and MIDI out. You have the manual button. This, if you press, it lights up and activates manual mode. In this mode, wherever the knobs are set is what you are hearing. Then you have the channel up and channel down buttons. Now, the pod has 36 channel locations. They're arranged with 9 banks numbered 1 to 9. And then within those banks, you have 4 patches, which are called A, B, C, and D, allowing you to bank 36 different sounds. There are 32 different amp models to choose between. As you'll see in the sound demo, there are dual amp models on each of the selections. You select them with the amp model knob, and then if you hold the tap hold switch down, you can select the second model when you go back to the one you're on. There is a tuner button, which starts up a very intuitive, very simple tuner. There is a noise gate button, which, as it says, turns on and off the noise gate. And there is also a tap button. Now, the tap button controls and sets display of the current tempo or speed of things like delay, tremolo, chorus, flanger, rotary speaker. Now, to use a tap control, you tap the button at the tempo you want, much like most tap controls. You can also simply hold the tap button and turn the effect tweak knob to change speed as well. As mentioned before, the tap hold function also allows you to select the secondary amp models and also allows you to use the effect to select cab models. There is also a save button, which allows you to save the patches you select. And the last feature of the buttons on the front is the MIDI button. This button is used to set the pod's MIDI channel and dump sounds via MIDI. Also featured on the front of the pod is the amp model selector knob and the effect and cab selector knob. And then starting from the left all the way over to the right hand side, you have the output level, you have the drive, you have bass, middle, treble, channel volume, reverb, and finally effect tweak. The pod runs off of a 9-volt power supply, which has a 2000 milliamp draw. So there was some info on the pod, and those were the specs of the pod. Now let's go over and hear it in action. So we've got the pod set up with everything zeroed out, from the effects tweak all the way down, the reverb down, channel volume at 12 o'clock just so we can get a little bit of sound. Treble down, middle down, bass down, drive down, and the output we will set to around 12 o'clock as well. There you go, perfect. And we are on the tube preamp setting. I'm using my RG7321 and it is in drop A at the moment. No bells and whistles, just the stock guitar. And this is it in drop A with a tube preamp setting. Now this is the line 6 clean setting. This is the clean setting I've used many times. I do like this one a lot. This is the line 6 crunch setting. This is the line 6 drive setting. A bit of distortion there. It's not over the top. It's very bassy. This is the line 6 layer setting. Nice setting there. I think it's a layer of a bit of clean and a bit of crunch. This is the small tweed setting. This is the tweed blues setting. The black panel. Some fantastic amp models built into here. It's such a natural tone. I wouldn't use that myself for anything specific or any of my projects, but it's just such a nice tone to have a play around with. Now this is the modern Class A. This is the Brit Class A. This is the Brit Blues. Brit Classic. Brit High Gain. Now, amongst a lot of these, we've got things like this is a Marshall model. We have like the rectifier, which is the rectified with the modern high gain, which is based on PVs, and we have things like the Line 6 Insane, which is based on the SLO 100. And these are really lovingly recreated in these amp models. And here we have the rectifier. One of my personal favourites, the modern high gain. The fuzz box. That there is all of your first sounds available to you. For each amp has two. Most of them are different. A lot of them are just subtle changes, maybe a little roll off of some of the gain, which you can do anyway with the drive. So there's a lot of options there. I won't go through all of them because some of them will be hard to differentiate, especially through the mic audio that's picking this up, the processor through my speakers. But for example, I'll give you one example which is a favourite sound of mine, which is the SLO 100 modelled Line 6 Insane. So we'll get a little comparison between the two that are on that same selection, which is the Line 6 Layer and the Line 6 Insane, just so you can hear that there are two sounds. Now how we achieve that is by going from this to the Layer, and here we're on the Layer. Now that flashing button we've been seeing all this time is the tap hold. We hold that down and we flick up, away and back to the Layer, and what we have now on that same setting is an absolutely massive difference between the Layer and the Insane, and you have that for every one of the amp models, which is really interesting. Now we'll head over and check out the effects as well, and they have a double selection feature as well, but that was something else we'll talk about after. And what I've chosen to do is still one of my favourite sounds, which is the modern high gain. It gives you quite an obvious difference between the effects because that distortion really rings out. So we are on bypass, no distortion, no effects, sorry, and we'll go on now to check out the compressor setting next. So this is the compressor. Good compressor should really work in the background, tightening things up, so that's pretty cool. Now we go on to the trem. Chorus 1. self-explanatory there. Flanger 2. I used to think you couldn't really use flangers in any cool way because they were kind of a cheesy effect, but SYL, Strapping Young Lad album, song Aftermath, the last riff, beautiful use of a flanger, just a little nugget of info there for people. Rotary, not one of my favourites. Funny enough, the only setting on the effects that is also a washing line. Simple stuff, delay compressor. Cool combination. Delay tremolo. Delay chorus 1. Delay chorus 2. Delay flanger 1. Flanger 2. The last of the effects, my favourite of the modulation-y kind of really altering effects apart from maybe the flangers, is the delay swell, or I like to call it the whale song. Could do that all day, I love that. We are back to bypass. So another feature obviously I've talked about is the cab select. Now we are, I think, as a basic setting for most of these high gain cabs, we are on a 4x12. Nice full kind of sound. So let's try out the first difference, which is a 1x8. 1x8 setting. Quite a lot more focused, but thinner sounding. Might be nice with some of the more clean, like the black panel or the tweed, but not so much for the distortion, it's a bit thin. 1x12. Cool sounding, I do like that. This is a 2x12, one of the 2x12. It's nice and aggressive, but I don't think pushes enough air for me as much as a 4x12 does. It is a 4x10. More obviously an obvious configuration for bass amp settings. Pretty cool. territory of A. 4x12s, and that sounds pretty cool to me. So the last thing we'll do now in this section is we'll take a look at some of the options when it comes to the EQ, and those obviously start over here on this side with the drive knob. So we start out, this is the basic setting for the modern high game when you click onto it. So we can go from this to this when we engage the drive, and we have edited that, and it tells you next to the number that we've edited. I just chose 8A as a random patch and bank, so we have no drive now, not much drive, and we can go from that to, so that's your drive options. Now the bass, no bass, tuning, whack all the bass on, and we've got beat, and so on. Mids now, we have no mids. No mids, no mids. Nicely distorted, but a bit thin, a bit empty. Put those mids up, and we've got body. Now the body parts like throat and a little bit of chest in there. Now the same for treble. No treble. Now the treble up. Now the channel volume, I'm not going to mess with, I'm just going to leave it where it is because that's like a utilitarian thing. The effect tweak I'm not going to play with because I already explained what that does. Basically, if I didn't explain, I'll explain now. And if I'm explaining for a second time, you get twice the explanation for the price of one. Basically, it controls the intensity of your effects. Rotary is going to be kind of crazy and all over the place. You can temper it down, you can bring down your flanger so it's not so extreme, you can kind of bring the compression a little bit down and control it. It's just, yeah, effect tweak, it kind of does what it does. Now the one thing I am going to play with is reverb, because I like the reverb on this thing. I love the reverb on the pod. I can go from dry to dry. One note is all you need when you can do this. Come on, reverb. That's just awesome. Church hall, school hall, public toilet, a lot of reverb. Love that. Sounds great. So hopefully you got a basic feel for the controls. Those amp models are expansive. The effects are really useful and really cool, and the effect tweak knob really gives you a bit of a taste. It is a shame you can't use more than one effect at a time, but you probably wouldn't need to with how the effects would work together. The ones that would work, like delay compressor and delay trem, are already paired up, so that's really nice for the options. Cab sims are a cool option as well to have, because I have messed around, toyed with the 2x12 for some third guitar parts. I probably wouldn't use a 2x12 or a 1x12 for my main quad tracking, but the 4x12 is always there. And the EQ was really obviously self-explanatory. You can see how much of a shift there is between 0 and 10 on each of the EQs. And the drive, I mean, I wouldn't probably have the drive too far up above 12 o'clock because the saturation gets a bit, digital, so I would avoid that. And yeah, I mean, you've seen the settings, now let's go work out how we feel about this. So my thoughts on the Line 6 Pod 2.0 are simple. I love it. I've always loved this since I first got one. I watched a video not too long ago that Ola England did saying, is this 20-year-old piece of kit as good as what's available today? And before I even started the video, I gave it a big thumbs up because I knew he was going to be pleasantly surprised by what he'd find with the pod. It's a fantastic piece of kit. Everyone I know who's never used one, I get them to have a go on it or try it. I even recently took it to a practice movie with me when we had some issues with cabs and amps. We had some dropout with availability of cabs for a practice space. And I knew that the PA for the venue we were practicing in was fantastic and had wedge monitors, so I was able to run the pod from the left and right output into two breakouts on stage and have two monitors for the guitarist. One for the guitarist and one for myself and the other guitarist. So a massively versatile piece of kit. I do own the bass pod. I don't get as much use out of that because of my board and my bass board, but it's a fantastic piece of kit as well. And I have used that at a specific small pop-up gig type situation for a wedding where I used that to play bass with a cobbled together band, and it served purpose fantastically. And I used it for years before. As soon as I got my pod and had some time with it, I had to get a bass pod. So yeah, can only say positive things about the pod. Specific features I love that we went through and looked at is I love the amp models are so true to the originals. Like I said, the SLO 100 is one of my favourite. The Soldano SLO 100 is one of my favourite models, Sims. The Line 6 Insane, it sounds like it would be terrible. Because I think if anyone's used a Spider 2 to 4, I think they had the Insane settings on them. A lot of people would say they're bad, don't like them at all. But I personally found the Insane is so malleable, and that high gain output, you can temper it down so much that when I would usually have the drive engaged, I wouldn't even pass 6 o'clock. Or 12 o'clock, sorry, the middle with the gain. I wouldn't even go anywhere near that, and it would just give you so much clarity to the notes you're playing. The tread plate sort of versions on there, the Rex, the modern high gain, which I think a lot of them cover things like the high gain settings on JCMs and things like that. They're fantastic high gain settings, and the clean settings, the tube preamps and some of the clean settings are actually brilliant. The black tweed and things like that, they're really versatile. You can find and program so many sounds into it. That's a great feature. The programming is fantastic on it. It's really handy. I have my patches that I use for demoing for my projects. I have a couple of patches for when I'm demoing for one specific project where I use some other pedals extended on it to sort of model the sound, and I have my specific demos that I use, settings that I use for demos in my band as well. They are super easy to recall, no problem. They're there when I need them. I can modify them as I go as well if I fancy, and then save them. Really simple, couple buttons, all intuitive, click and touch. It's all in the guides, like the instruction book that comes with it. The cab sims, fantastic. The different type of cabs, you get a breadth of kind of like options. If I personally really like the modern high gain sound and the insane sound, I kind of flip between those two. I've also got the option of tempering by using different cab settings. I like the 4x12, but there's a couple of different options with that as well. Now I know there's a ton of people out there who've got Kempers, Helixes, all the different sort of like models that are available. The quad core Texes that are available now from Neural DSP is a big game changer. But the thing with them is they cost a fortune. There's a lot going on, and you pay a lot of money for them nowadays. Comparative to what's available, the money you pay for a pod now is crazy what you get with it. You can do so much with this, and for someone who is experienced with myself with crafting sounds and mixing and mastering tracks, I see so much potential in a pod. I used it on my EP for my band for both guitarists. I used it for third guitar parts. I have in the past actually used this, funnily enough, strange, but I used this for a bass once in a pinch and managed to do a lot of tweaking, but got it to sound pretty good as well, actually, to be honest with you. It was decent. And I haven't even mentioned the massive array of options with the EQing. The EQing, the drive setting is really good. It's very sweeping from 0 to full. There's a lot of options in there. Bass, middle, treble, and the reverb is a really cool little touch. The effect tweak is a nice little thing. I tend to go quite in the middle with that, or a little bit of that, depending on what effect I'm using. And the rest of it is all pretty self-explanatory, and you'll find your way around it. The effects themselves are fantastic. They're amazing. Some of them are really cool. Like I really like the delay swell effects. The compressor is really cool. It has a fantastic built-in noise gate. I actually had a point where I was using it to do something and I needed feedback, and I struggled to actually do anything with the feedback, and then realized I had the gate on, and it was just so good. The gate was so intuitive and so perfectly working. Obviously being a digital gate, it worked perfectly with the digital components of the processor. And the last thing I'll touch on is the direct and the amp settings of the AIR. The direct is fantastic. I use that when I run it through my studio setup. I select channel 1 as the input 1. I select channel 2 as the input 2. And what I have there is I have 2 different signals coming out of the pod. So I actually have double tracking with one single recording. It's a super cool way to quickly quad track by just doing 2 recordings of that. And if I have 2 program settings, which I do, I've got basically 2 guitarists there. I've double tracked each guitarist. I've got a big fat full sound, and then to beef that up with bass, or maybe add some third guitar and how much I mix in the drums and stuff like that, you get such a really cool modern sound from something that is 20 plus years old. That's amazing on its own. Now, I wouldn't go as far as to say that you could ditch your helixes and ditch all those things and buy this, because obviously it probably won't match up completely to those for the amazing little things you can do with it and the software that's available. Things like the Neural DSP softwares online, like the Nameless suites and the Fort and stuff that's online, are fantastic. I personally think if you're going to go hardware and you trust hardware the most, things like pods are amazing starter pieces of equipment. They are, I mean, I'm not a starter. I'm probably above an intermediate. I'm advanced in what I know about production, what I know about playing and music, and making music in general. And I love the pod. I swear by it, and I would recommend it to anyone to just try it and see what they can get out of it. And for those prices that we've seen it's available at, who's to argue? It's the cost of close to the cost of a Behringer pedal or one of the TC pedals. Nothing to really lose sleep over. So we spoke about the features, spoke about some of the benefits, and we heard the Line 6 pod. Tell me what you think of it. Leave me a message on the comments. Let me know what you think of the video. Let me know what you think of the channel. And mostly tell me your experience with the pod, because I like hearing about pods, and when I show it to people go, oh yeah, I've used one of them before. A lot of people underestimate, and a lot of people say that, I used one of these back in the day. Yeah, they're not great, but they're pretty cool. And then I think if you get to see what you can do with them, you can shock people, definitely. So if you like the video, please let us know by liking the video, share, subscribe to the channel. The more of you that subscribe, the more I can do, and I can get some more interesting overviews out there. I've got some plans in the pipeline for some cool videos and some ideas and some different stuff to come down the line as well. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss anything if you are already subscribed to us. So that's enough from us at OGW Studios today. Take it easy. Take care.